An armoured train carrying the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has crossed into the Chinese border, making its way to the capital, Beijing. Well, Kim Jong-un is expected to join around 20 other world leaders at Wednesday's military parade in Beijing, marking Japan's surrender 80 years ago, ending the Second World War. Well, this is Mr. Kim's first trip to China for 6 years and the first time that he's ever attended an international gathering. Meanwhile, President Xi Jinping has been holding talks with his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin in the Chinese capital. Mr. Putin described President Xi as a dear friend and said the strategic nature of the two countries' relations were at an unprecedentedly high level. The latest talks followed their meeting on the sidelines of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit. Well, let's go straight to Beijing and join my colleague Steve Lai.
Yeah, hi Regini. Those diplomatic efforts have just really continued on from that two-day SCO summit in Tianjin you were referring to. And that's right, President Putin has met President Xi today again and referred to him as a dear friend. For his part, though, President Xi told Putin that China-Russia relations have withstood the test of international changes. And he added that Beijing was willing to work with Moscow to promote what he said was the construction of a more just and reasonable global governance system. Well, tomorrow, Wednesday, China will mark its 80th year, or 80 years since the end of World War II, as you mentioned, with a large military parade. That's going to be featuring tens of thousands of troops and a range of new weapons. At the parade, the Chinese president will be standing shoulder to shoulder with leaders from some of the most sanctioned nations in the world, including Russia, North Korea and Iran. And we can get more on what to expect tomorrow with Stephen McDonnell. He's joining us from our Beijing bureau. Before we get to tomorrow, though, Stephen, let's talk about today and that meeting between President Xi Jinping and President Putin. What more has come out from it?
Well, in fact, before we get to that, I might even mention the breaking news we're getting from Reuters. They seem to have spotted Kim Jong-un's train arriving in Beijing, or at least in some part of Beijing. So it could be that the North Korean leader will be seen in the streets here, at least his motorcade will be seen in Beijing very soon. And we'll see what sort of a welcome he gets. TASS news agency is also reporting that Vladimir Putin may meet Kim Jong-un here. And there's even been a lot of speculation that the Chinese, North Korean and Russian leader might at some point all sit down together and have a bit of a meeting. Now, whether they have a meeting or not, we'll definitely see them together watching the parade tomorrow. There they'll be up on the podium, and that is going to be quite an amazing moment when they're there with those other world leaders watching this vast parade go by them. But in the meantime, yes, you mentioned that Xi Jinping had met Vladimir Putin. Lots of friendly talk. Essentially, they're both describing the relations between the two have reached this absolutely high level. I mean, given how bad in the past China-Russia relations have been, some analysts would say it wouldn't take a lot to get to a higher level because, remember in the Cold War they were enemies, and since then the trade hasn't been amazing between them. I mean, certainly China buys a lot of oil and gas from Russia, but there could be a lot more interaction between the two. In terms of the readout, though, of what they've said to one another, I'll just give you a few highlights. So, for example, China is willing to strengthen high-level exchanges between the two countries. We'd expect all that sort of thing. But it was interesting. Xi Jinping spoke about the strong momentum these countries have in terms of their development and revitalization. Now, economists who are looking at Russia's economy would say it doesn't look too strong to them, given that it's a war-ravaged country. Really, the economy's in dire straits there. Could be much better without the war. This is interesting too. In the official readout, we're hearing that both Russia and China have a high degree, or place a high degree of significance on the international rule of law. Now, the government in Ukraine would say that that sounds ridiculous to them, given that Russia invaded Ukraine, a sovereign country, and how can you say it respects the international rule of law? But there you have it. These are the types of things that get said at these meetings. And certainly, Vladimir Putin is making the most of not only the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, where he met a whole lot of other leaders, and according to reports in the Chinese press, right late into the night, and it didn't get to Beijing until after midnight, apparently, then he can potentially meet Kim Jong-un, and of course he's been speaking to Xi Jinping today, and then the parade tomorrow. So for him, for Vladimir Putin, it's a great chance to be appearing to be, you know, more of a statesman, when in much of the world he's seen actually as a bit of a pariah.
Yeah, thanks very much, Stephen, for getting us across those details. We're going to cross now to our South Korea correspondent, Jean McKenzie, to get more about the significance of Kim Jong-un's arrival in Beijing here. And Jean, Stephen was just telling us that his train has been spotted in Beijing. It seems like his arrival here is now come to be.
Yes, Steve, that's also what we're seeing South Korean media here reporting. They're reporting that his train has now arrived. He has been travelling overnight from Pyongyang. The total journey was, I think, expected to take him around 20 hours. So those timings would fit, because this train moves incredibly slowly, because it's armoured, it's very heavy. But this is how Kim Jong-un likes to travel. It's how he feels most secure. This is a major moment for him, because he rarely leaves North Korea, and when he does, it's very finely calibrated. Often in this train, he's very tightly protected, and he usually just goes to meet leaders one-on-one, and very rarely. This is the first time that he has ever attended a major international event like this with many world leaders. It's also the first time he's even visited China in 6 years, which is significant in itself, because China is actually North Korea's most important ally. It is the country that has kept North Korea afloat all these years, and yet we've seen over the last couple of years Kim Jong-un really prioritise his relationship with Russia and Vladimir Putin over anything else, because he has been supporting Putin's war in Ukraine by supplying him with weapons and with soldiers in return, we think, for vast amounts of money. And in the process of this, his relationship with China, we think, has become a little strained. We've seen signs of this, because China, the reports say, is not best pleased at the level of cooperation between Mr. Kim and Mr. Putin. So him arriving here in Beijing today to attend this major military parade suggests that he's ready to recalibrate his relationship with Beijing. Perhaps he is conscious that the war in Ukraine and his relationship with Vladimir Putin is not going to last forever. But there is more to this. Because it is this first international event that Kim has ever attended, we are going to get these remarkable pictures that we have never had before of him standing shoulder to shoulder with multiple world leaders, but at the front, him with Xi Jinping and with Vladimir Putin. North Korea really showing the West and the United States that it has firmly aligned itself with China and with Russia, and also showing that Kim Jong-un is just not as isolated as he used to be. He's in a much stronger position than the last time he sat down to try to negotiate with the United States about giving up his nuclear weapons. That was during Trump's first term as president. The suggestion being that perhaps North Korea is trying to buy itself some bargaining power if it's going to sit down with President Trump again, something we know that President Trump wants, because he said so just a couple of weeks ago. But we are still waiting to find out whether Kim is going to meet individually with Mr. Xi and with Mr. Putin, and whether the three of them will all meet together.
Yeah, lots to look out for. Thanks very much, Jean, for giving us that context of the arrival of Kim Jong-un, North Korea's leader. Jean McKenzie there, our Seoul correspondent. Now we can pick up the conversation with Charles Parton. He's former British diplomat in China and associate fellow at Council on Geostrategy, and get his thoughts. Charles, what do you make of the arrival of we've just seen pictures of the train that Kim Jong-un is arriving on, coming into Beijing. What do you make of his presence here amongst so many other leaders?
Well, clearly it's important, because as your correspondent said, they haven't met very much. There was a flurry of meetings in 2018 and 19 when President Trump was going to meet Kim Jong-un, and I think that moved Xi Jinping to try and head him off at the pass. But I'm not sure that it's going to make a real difference to the nature of the relationship. I mean, clearly, because Xi Jinping is really very anti-American in his stance, and North Korea is too, they have that in common. But North Korea is very unpredictable. It's a nuclear worry for China. I mean, what happens if Kim, the maverick, did launch an attack on South Korea, nuclear or otherwise, or even on Japan, or even on America? That would pull China into an appalling mess. And I think at the back of the Chinese mind is always the worry that North Korea could be an unstable regime. There's a lot of poverty, starvation, unhappiness, and if the regime really hit trouble, instability could flood over the Chinese border in the form of refugees and other things into provinces in northern China, which are also suffering economically and probably not as stable as he would wish. So these problems are not going to go away, I think.
Yeah, but it does present Kim Jong-un a stage to be seen with other leaders, and which could in turn lead to more development in his country, could it not?
Certainly it could, if Kim so wishes and Xi Jinping wishes. But Korean Chinese relations have always been pretty tense. They may North Korea is Beijing's only real ally. I mean, they have an alliance treaty. China tries to stay clear of alliances. But nevertheless, it's been a pretty rocky relationship over the years. Will it get vastly better? I'm not sure that actually underneath it will improve as much as the optics will seem from when he's standing there looking over Tiananmen.
Oh, Charles, we'll have to leave it there, but thanks very much for sharing your thoughts with us. Do appreciate your time. Charles Parton, former British diplomat in China and Associate Fellow at Council on Geostrategy. So, Regina, you can see there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of world leaders descending here on Beijing with a lot of different talking points with their relationships with each other, and also what that means for their relationships with the United States and President Trump as well, where all these things tend to intersect on many of our news stories. I'll be here throughout today and again tomorrow when the parade gets underway at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. We'll have all that coverage for you live here on BBC News. Regina, back to you.